today about something. Well, first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about Diana. Diana is working. She has her own company. She's a First Nations business owner, Native woman business owner called Pelora, as well as her 501c3 Dreamwalker Enterprises. A little bit about Dreamwalker Enterprises. It is a foundation that was created to grow and empower First Nation female to sustain their own lives and the lives of their children, to make a lasting impact on the futures of our communities by reuniting Indigenous women with their power to create and sustain, to create a space for First Nation women where they can flourish. So this is a really beautiful vision way of seeing, and I think that today's topic, Native people in the film industry, past and present. As a filmmaker, I created my own company called RedSky Inc. RedSky Inc. Productions, and as a filmmaker and a documentarian, telling our stories is really important to me, and I really want to get your perspective in terms of how has Hollywood viewed and portrayed First Nation peoples.
Well, I think we know that they've done a very poor job, and their purpose, the vision that they create of us, is to benefit them and to benefit the movie and to benefit the industry. It's never been to portray us as anything real, and I believe that that's one of the most damaging effects of colonialism on our people as a whole since media has began. And one of the things that we really want to focus on is working to end those stereotypical images. And finally, for the first time, to fight our battle, we have science behind us. And the science also says, and what I think will be why why it's going to be eventually turning the tide. I said earlier that I think that we as a people are at a certain position in the timeline of the growth of humanity where we can click and make some changes or influence change. We know now that the use of stereotypes is not only damaging to the child that is being stereotyped, it is equally damaging to the other child that's being exposed to it. So for every non-First Nations child that is exposed to a stereotypical image or movie or song or whatever of a First Nations person, that child is being damaged. We have science behind us now to prove that. We have all kinds of studies from everywhere, including the Journal for Sports Medicine, that says specifically that it's psychologically damaging. So I think it's time. And I think that now that we have science behind us and we can support and really put pressure on the schools to change, that's one part of it. But what you're doing is the other part. And that is just as vital, and in some ways even more vital, because you're giving the world a true vision of who we are.
Right.
And the best thing about that is you're telling them that we're not all alike. that we're not all alike. So yeah.
Well, one of the things for myself growing up that was very important is telling stories. And
I'm not surprised. And with you, that telling stories was important growing up.
It was very important, and I loved it because, especially when I was, engaging with my elders, there was always like a moral that was being, because it was just like this idea that you can't have wisdom handed to you, like, okay, believe this thing. It was this, you have to come to your own conclusion, So for me, that's really important, to continue that tradition. And maybe we are not sitting around a campfire underneath a billion stars, remembering hearing those stories again and again. But this is a tool, and it's a way for us to tell our own stories.
Yeah. And take advantage of technology, which is something our people have never done in the course of our history here. And I think now it's the generation to do it.
So my question for you is, are Native First Nation people given the same kind of exposure and representation in the film industry as non-natives?
No. I mean, we're just now getting to where some filmmakers with integrity are seeking out First Nations actors and First Nation writers in order to tell our story, but that's rare and far between. You know, there's a very popular show on right now, a cowboy show on, and several of the natives in the show are not native. Now, come on. This is the United States of America. We've got all kinds of Indian actors here. I mean, you know probably 10 people that could, but they really couldn't find an actor. They really couldn't find a native actor.
Right.
So I think that yeah.
So my question, I know you were talking about this earlier, about the psychological damage of stereotypes, and to kind of briefly touch back on that, I want to ask is, how does the lack of representation affect our communities and our identities? Because really, I think that's where that psychological damage is.
It makes us not be proud of who we are. It makes us want to hide it. It makes us be selective of when and where we own our Indianness and when and where we show it. And it should never be that way for any child, of color or not of color. They should be able to be proud of who they are, and that's the thing that sometimes, I know growing up, I was wise enough sometimes to not throw out that I was Native, because I knew that would throw a different light on me.
Yeah, and I think so, you know, especially I know for my own mother, it was, you know, and for that generation in general, it was just, especially here in Texas, it was like a dirty word, you know. It was just like to acknowledge your Indianness, to acknowledge your Native heritage was just like, you know, it was not good. So, you know, again, I will reiterate, you know, for me as an Apache woman, as a Native woman, as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, you know, I feel it is very, very important to tell our own stories, and to encourage the youth to try and take up that mantle as filmmakers, to tell our own stories. Why do you think it's so important for us to tell our own stories?
So that they're the truth, to begin with, you know what I mean? And so that people can begin to see us as humans and not as toys or not as something, a relic. And I think that telling your own story humanizes you to other humans. But I think the most important thing is that telling our stories will weave us back to our ancestors and to our children, the ones that are listening to the stories. So while I believe it'll impact us positively as a people, because it'll change the way people look at us.
Right.
Because right now humans are just all crazy about spirituality now, and they're all looking around for something different. But the most important part of it is that it connects us to our ancestors and to our children.
Something that I experienced as a filmmaker and as a woman, when I encountered other filmmakers that were not Native, that were trying to tell my story or tell my people's story, was that they really didn't have the same perspective as someone who is, you know, who participates in that community, who understands the histories of like these people. And the questions that they were coming from were just like questions I would never ask, and of course they would never ever even think to begin to see it the way I see it.
Yeah.
So
did you find some of the questions offensive?
I did. I
See,
did.
that's what stereotype does. Stereotype makes people believe that if that person belongs to a particular group, you can ask them questions and treat them in a way you would never treat anybody else. That's another thing that stereotype does for us.
So I guess, yeah, exactly. So it's important. We need to tell our stories. We know our stories. We need to be the ones to tell it. And I also think too that you know, in terms of like literature and in terms of law in general, it's always been not our voice, not our hands at the, you know. So then of course they write whatever they want to, and then that becomes the history.
Right.
And so when you don't have the correct history, they look at you, well, though it says here, but no, I know my people's history. You don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
No, I've been right there.
So and that would be my next question. Is there a lack of sensitivity in regards to Native people in the film industry Are they kind of clueless? Is there a little bit of cluelessness going on, you think?
Yeah, I think that, like with any other industry, there's people out there that are just want to make money, and there's people out there that want to produce art and say something. And I think I think the first is probably 80% of the film and media industry, is that people that want to turn it and monetize it. So those are the ones that are taking advantage of the stereotypical infrastructure that's been in place forever.
Yep.
And someone that I really admired as an actor and a director, I'll never watch any of his films again, because now he's produced something that was completely, and I believe that when they do it now, you know what I mean? When they produce something that is completely racist and offensive, when they do it now, that is a slap in the face. You know, if they produced something 20 years ago before they knew better, but now you know better. Now there's no reason to do that other than you want to make money off of an image that you know creates damage to someone. And see, that's my mission now. My mission now is to make sure that non-First Nations people know that the use of stereotypes is also damaging their children. And so if you're supporting a stereotype of me, you're damaging your child. So what kind of parent are you? So that's the message I'm spreading right now.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. We need that message spread as often as we can. You know.
But you're helping with clearing that up, filmmakers like you.
I'm doing my best, you know, but you know, I don't talk about me. But you know, one of the things, I know that you recently got to go to a Native First Nations Film Festival. Could you just tell me a little bit of, first the name of that film festival, and a little bit of your experience there, maybe a film or two that you saw that really touched your heart, and kind of explore that, where we're seeing now that we're kind of taking back, not only are we taking back the narrative, but we're also taking back the platform to lift up those films.
Right. Oh gosh. It was the Indigenous Women's Film Festival.
Where's that located?
And it was hosted in Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska, by the Native Vision Media. And they do film festivals, and this is their first Indigenous women one.
Wow.
So it was, it had to be produced or written by an Indigenous woman, or significantly culturally appropriate, and everybody is included on the subject matter. So the one that there's two things that I took away from that. First of all, I felt like the stories were really authentic, and I felt like I was surprised that they were just really straightforward. And I enjoyed and appreciated that. The two that made the most impression was Warrior Woman, and her daughter was there. Mary Thunderhark's daughter was there to speak afterwards. And see, this is a perfect example. I am in my 50s, and my father was kind of part of AIM back, not in any big way or anything like that, so not saying like that, but during Wounded Knee time, right? So I have that rolling in my head. And until I saw that movie, I had no idea what women did for that movement in those camps, and what they did to support the movements, and how on the front lines they were, because all the stories are told about the men. And I don't want to take anything away from what they did, but if we're going to lift up our women, and we're going to let our daughters and granddaughters know that we are warrior women, then they need to know these stories.
Absolutely.
They need to know that there was an army of women that was supporting everything that
feeding
was going on.
And taking care of.
And not even just feeding. When you read that, they actually had a school. AIM had a school that was created by the Thunderhawk people and families that taught the kids that were associated with the AIM camp.
Wow.
And not only taught them the things that they needed to know, reading, writing, all that, but taught them about our culture, taught them about treaty rights, taught them about, I mean, they were building the next leaders right there. And I didn't know that, you know, so that was great. And knowing that. And the second one, I am so sorry, I cannot remember the name of it, but it was regarding what's going on with Child Protective Services in Australia and with the Aborigine people in Australia and how they're taking them away. What was fascinating about that film was the story, which I didn't have any clue was happening, but they mixed, it was a multimedia film. So they had part of it in animation and part of it in, you know, a live shot. So the really emotional parts that were hard, you know, like when you hear a story that's really hard to hear, those were animated. So that just, I don't know, you would think that would lend some kind of, you know, frivolousness to it, but it didn't. It made you connect even more. So that was really, I thought that was a wonderful use of two medias. And it was produced by two women.
Excellent. I'm always excited to hear about my fellow women filmmakers, especially my fellow Native filmmaker women. And so that's good, you know, and I know that a project that you and I are working on together is the Turtle Island Arts Festival,
Yay.
which will be the very first Indigenous film and music festival ever held in Texas. And I'm super excited about that because I, as a filmmaker, want to lift up my brothers and sisters who are trying to get their messages out as well. And yeah, that's exciting stuff, right? That is some super exciting stuff.
We are so excited to be a part of it. Dreamwalker Enterprises is so excited to be a part of it. The Dreamwalker Enterprises is actually twofold. It is the enterprise part is a company that we're starting to feed into the foundation, to finance the foundation, but also to put First Nations people to work that live in Caddo County, Oklahoma, where my dad's people are from. So it's the business is going to fund the foundation. And as you said before, the foundation, one of our directives is to create a space where women can be empowered and reconnect with their ability to sustain life. So my husband is Cherokee, and I learned a core principle of their beliefs, that if the world is to stay in balance, then the sex that produces life must be empowered to sustain it. And that simple concept was something that I was trying to verbalize in my head for years and couldn't really connect it. But to rebalance the world, we need to create that space. And the first space is telling stories and empowering women and making money. So the film festival will make money for these women and you, and empower us and tell stories.
Absolutely, and we are lucky to have the Mexican American Cultural Center, which is located near downtown Austin, as well as having the last weekend of South by Southwest, March 20th and 21st.
Right.
So we're very lucky in that regard, and I'm excited, you know, because in my travels. I traveled all over to, the name of my film is Keep the Fire Lit, Lost Tribes of Texas. And in my travels, and also in a lot of my own activism, because I do talk to a lot of the Apaches in Mexico, because, you know, I'm trying to build those relationships again, because, you know, I think it's been like 150 years since we all been together. I met a lot of other filmmakers that were just, I was just like, oh my God, this film needs to be heard, this film needs to be seen. And it's really, you know, for me personally, as a Ninde woman, you know, it's all about service. You know, how can we lift each other up? You know, and Turtle Island, the whole story behind it is, and there's a prophecy that one day Turtle Island will be healed again, and it's when the South and the North come together, when the eagle and the condor come together, then we're able to, then Turtle Island will become whole again. And that's what we used to call this place. That's what we used to call North America, is Turtle Island. And I know I have my little medicine pouch here. It was gifted to me by one of my elders. They love me a whole lot, you know, and they tell me I need to slow down. They're like, you're going too fast. I'm like, but there's all this stuff I need to do.
We talked about self-care. That's one thing.
Yeah, I think this is what she's trying to say. She's like, slow down, Fox. But you know, yes, and it's important to me to have those stories heard. And another thing that Turtle Island Arts Festival is going to be doing is offering up scholarships to the youth, because it has to carry on. I really want to personally, my mission as a founder of this festival is not only to be a platform for Indigenous voices and for First Nation films and First Nation music, but also to inspire a whole generation of filmmakers and a whole generation of musicians to really say, I can do it. This is possible. There's no way, you know. So that's my personal reason why I've kind of wanted to do this. Is because there's so many films that I want to see, you know, have a place to be seen, and
there's
also
so many stories to be told.
There is. I mean, I could do 20 documentaries. Like, I know I did a 75-minute feature-length film, but it's just a drop in the bucket when it comes to how much is really untold. You know, and I don't know if you know about this, but here in Texas, you know, just going down to the library, the biggest library in Texas, you go to try to find out about Texas tribes, and you find 5 books, and of those 5, and they're all written by non-native writers, and then you see row after row of books on all the U.S. presidents, and just like a whole
and all their civilizations.
And all these other civilizations.
And all their leaders in those civilizations.
And it's just like, what about me? What about my people? What about us?
And maybe it's a good thing there's not that many books on the shelves, because now your generation can produce them and tell the truth. So 100 years from now, when someone goes to the shelves, they'll have the real story.
And that is what we're trying to accomplish here, I believe. I'm just so excited. It's just really, really exciting. And
I can't wait to go see the place tomorrow.
I know. We're going to go see the place tomorrow, and it's really beautiful. It's right next to the Colorado River, and I know one of the things that we wanted to implicate in our festival was having some lectures by some elders, as well as a big closing and a beginning ceremony, because if it's not coming from spirit, then you need to stop right then. And that's how my perspective, you know, it's like, keep the fire lit, native wavelength. These are all inspirations from something higher. I feel like our ancestors are calling us to wake up right now, because Mother Earth needs us. And so there's no better way than just to do it right now, you know. We don't have to, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We only have today, so I try to get it out.
Thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. You know, and I want to just go ahead and again mention some of your projects that you're doing, your business. If you could talk to me about your 501c3 as well as your company.
Well, the 501c3, we're just getting started, and it's actually going to be a foundation ran by the family, which is something we've always wanted to do, and slowly build it up. We've got the foundation has put on one event, No More Stolen Sisters, on this past May the 5th, to raise awareness of the MMIW epidemic that's destabilizing our community.
And that can be a whole episode.
Yes.
We need to talk about that for sure.
Yes. Another partner that the foundation has is American Indian Heritage Day of Texas. They're the nonprofit that is working, that got the Indigenous Day on the calendars for the state of Texas.
Excellent.
But their long-term plan is to affect the education, to affect what children are being taught about Texas Indians. That's the long-term plan.
That's beautiful, because I'll tell you, it says we're extinct.
Yeah.
In my my social studies books in 4th, 3rd, 5th grade, it says, oh, there's no natives here.
Right.
But go ahead, I apologize.
It's okay. So that's the foundation, and then the company ProLaura is we are on the verge of some big expansions, and we do currently have an opening for a Python code writer.
Python code writer. You hear that? We're looking for one.
And they can be remotely located right now, not crazy remote, but so we're looking for that. And pretty soon we'll be looking for a marketing and a branding person, because we're building the company and preparing to sell it soon. So we'll be needing that. And probably a field person, technician with some electrical experience. for the field out in Midland. So we're growing. We're about to launch 2 new products, and one is so remote that it's crazy, but it really gives a good idea of what the software can do. So we're looking at automating a deer feeder that will release the food in relation to the sun, that will follow the movement of the sun and the moon and release the food. We're going to do a trial run with 65 units on Trevor Ranch, which is here in Texas, has offered to do it for us. So that is the same technology that we're using to automate pipelines in the oil fields is going to do the deer feeder. And then the next product, and the reason that we went into this was my husband, who's the inventor of the code, believed that we could really add a level of safety and a level of environmental responsibility to the movement of oil. And we tested out the software and the product on water, and now that we've done that, we're going to begin the prototype to do it on the oil pipelines. And if it will do what we think it'll do and what it's doing to the water pipelines, it will make a significant impact on what happens when a pipeline does leak.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much for coming on Native WaveLength and for sharing your voice as an Indigenous woman, as a First Nations woman and Caddo woman. And I'm really, really inspired by the things that are going to be coming up. We have a beautiful future ahead of us. Yes. Again, I want to thank everybody for listening in, for tuning in.